Hey, and welcome to our Kivy tutorial where we talk about formatting. In today's part, we bring together all the pieces we've covered in the previous videos. So today I'll show you how to set up your own color scheme and how you can then use that color scheme to format your buttons, your layouts, and your labels. Check it out.
Once you start playing around with colors in Kivy to change the colors of your widgets or your layouts, you'll find that your code will become quite long if you just basically give every label, every button, or every layout its own color. So I wanted to show you something that we've used which saves you from coding an awful lot, but also which allows you to basically create your own color theme or color scheme, if you like. So this is the little app that we'll create. This is just to show you the different color combinations. So you have a dark background, you have a light background. You can put this light background within a dark background. Then you have dark labels with light text, light labels with dark text, and then a button that is dark with light text when not pressed. And when it's pressed, it turns into a light button with dark text. Now, the other thing you can do is to have a dark button where the text remains light, because when you click it, it just changes to a different kind of blue. Right, so that is what we will build right now. And based on the previous videos in our formatting tutorial, we can now start putting all these things together, but with the added bonus of having our own color theme. So how am I going to create my own color theme? I'm going to create some instance variables in my app class in here. And once they are in there, that means I have access to those variables from within the Kivy file, as we have explained in previous videos. How do I get access to my instance variables? Well, that is through the init function. So let's set up our init function. And let's make sure to pull through the arguments and the keyword arguments. Of course, we are inheriting from app, so let's call the super function to call through the init function from the parent as well. And don't forget to pull through the args and the keyword arguments here as well. So now I can create my instance variables that define my colors. And remember, they are of the format RGBA. Now, on the internet, you have plenty of websites that show you the RGB values for different colors that you like. Remember, in Kivy, they have to be between 0 and 1. So you have to divide by 255 the values that you have found on the internet. So let me pause the video for a second so I can copy in the values that I found. So these are the values that I will go for. I have a dark background, a light background, a dark text, a light text, a dark widget, and a light widget. So they've all been defined as instance variables using self, and they are instance variables of my app instance. So in my Kivy file, I will have access to them calling the app object. And that's what we'll be looking at right now. So let me make this a little bit bigger. So let's create our own theme layout. So my box layout, I want that to be a dark one. So that inherits from box layout. Okay. Now in here, I want to set the background. Okay, so that is, as always, canvas before. You then define color in RGBA format, and this is where the trick comes in. So this is where our instance variables come into play. I know what color I want to use as a dark background because I've defined that in here as background dark. Now this is in my app class, so I can call the app object in Kivy. That gives me access to all the app instance variables. So background dark is one of those. Now, don't forget to draw the rectangle. Without that, you will have nothing, and so you need to take the position of the box layout. So the background needs to be the size and the position of the box layout. So that will be the self dot position, and the size is self dot size. So that should set the background of this box layout to the dark color I have defined here in my app. So the next one is a box layout with a light background. So that will be very similar. Of course, we just need to call a different color. So I'm going to call that light. And then from app, I'm going to call background light, and the rest is the same thing. I want to create an anchor layout as well. So for my anchor layout, I'll call it anchor layout. Let's start with the dark one. Dark, so that inherits from anchor layout. Now for my anchor layout, I need to set another property, which is the anchoring. Now I'm going to set everything to center, so both horizontally and vertically. And then the coloring of the background is the same. So I'm looking for the dark one, which is up here. So I can just simply copy that from my box layout. Just need to make sure the indentation is correct. And then for the anchor layout light, again, that is exactly the same. Just need to change the name to light and pull through the background light instance. So that's easy enough. Those are the layouts. So let's move on to the widgets now. And we want to create a dark label. So I'm going to call that label dark. Don't forget to inherit from label, because we have not defined a class in Python. Then I am going to do the same thing as I had before here. So to set my background, which I want to be dark, I do the canvas before, and instead of background light, I want my widget dark, because I want the dark label. So I'm going to, from app, I'm going to go for widget dark. Then the next thing to do is I also said I wanted the text to be light. So my color, that is the property for the text color, I want that to be the light text. So that is text light from my app. Okay, so from app, I take text light. So that's it for my dark label, and then let's do the light label, which of course is called label light. Instead of widget dark, we pull through widget light, and we want the color to be dark. Okay, now buttons. Okay, so we want to create a dark button here, so I'm going to call that button dark, which inherits from button. All right, so far so good. Now, the thing to understand about buttons, as we have explained in previous videos, is the background color and the way you interact with that. So the background color, which is an RGBA value, is a filter that is applied to the default background colors from 1, the pressed state, and 2, the normal state. So if you give this a color, this will not be the color that you see. This color that you give it will be mixed with the default colors. If you don't want that to happen, you need to switch off the background colors by setting the background normal and background down properties to the empty string. So firstly, we'll do that in a second. Firstly, I'm going to give the background color. So I want this to be a dark button. So from app, I'm going to get widget dark. So that's my RGBA value. Now I do want this to be the pure color instead of the mixed color. We'll do a mixed version a bit further down. So I want to set my background normal to the empty string, and I also want to set the background down to the empty string. So that will mean that the colors will be the pure colors instead of the mixed colors. Now, that also means, though, that I no longer have my default colors, which are different for pressed and non-pressed. So that will mean that in this particular situation, this widget dark color will be the background both in my buttons pressed and unpressed state. Now, that's not what I want. I want there to be a different color when the button is pressed. So I want it to be dark when it's not pressed, so a dark button with light text is what I want, which turns into a light button with dark text when pressed. So I want it to be this color, but only if the state of the button is normal, as in not pressed. If it is pressed, so else, I actually want that to be a different color. I want that to be the light color. So when I click it, the button should turn light in terms of background. Now, let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so I want to do something similar for the color of the text. So I want the button to have a dark background with a light text in its normal state. So from app, I'm going to call text light, and that is if the state of this button is normal. So if it's not pressed, else I want from the app the text dark color. And you can see how this gets easier if you have defined your own colors and you've given them an easy name. Now I'm going to create a second type of button. It's also dark. We're going to call it mix, because this is where I'm not going to remove the default colors when pressed and non-pressed. So the filter will just be applied to the default colors now. So let's start with copying this, but now so that I'm not going to change these background colors, and that now also means I don't necessarily need this if statement anymore, because by default the background color for press and unpressed is different, and so if I apply a filter to it, they will still be different. I can choose to still use this if statement. It just means that it will apply a dark filter when pressed and a light filter when unpressed, but that can cause some weird effects. So I'm just going to have one filter, and when you apply a dark filter, it so happens that the dark text then actually doesn't really stand out when the button's pressed. So I'm going to get rid of this as well. So the color of this button will always be light, and the background color will still be different when pressed and unpressed, but by applying one filter to the default colors of pressed and unpressed. So the next thing to do is to build my main screen. So I create my screen and it inherits from, you guessed it, screen. I'm going to start with a grid layout with just 2 rows, just to show you the different combinations of colors really. So I'm going to start with a box layout, a dark one, and its orientation will be vertical. I'm going to apply some padding here so that the widgets are not all the way up to the edge of the box layout. Therefore, you can actually see the color or the background color of the box layout. And I'll apply some spacing as well between the widgets within the box layout so you can see the box layout's background color between the widgets. Okay, so I'm going to have a dark label, and I'm going to have a light label, and they will need some text. Okay, now I also want to create a button, but I want to center this button, as in I want to make this button smaller than the labels. So I'm going to stick this in its own grid layout so I can use different padding for it. Okay, so grid layout with only one column. And here's my padding. My horizontal padding is going to be quite significant, 200, and then I'm going to have my dark button in there. Now this is the normal button, as in the one that uses the actual colors, not the mixed one. And just as text, very originally, click me. There you go. That's my first part of the grid layout. Oh, I actually haven't populated this. There should be 2. So that was my first row. My second row is going to be an anchor layout. I'm actually going to pick the dark one because within there I'm going to have a light box layout. Now, for us to see the difference or see the background color of the anchor layout, as in the dark layout, we want to apply some padding. That means there will be a distance between the edge of the box layout and the edge of the anchor layout. Which box layout? Well, the one that is going in here right now. This box layout, again, we need to set its orientation. And as usual, I put that to vertical. And within this box layout, I'm going to apply some padding so that we can see the color of the box layout around the widgets within the box layout. And as before, some spacing. So for the exact same reason, to see the background color between the widgets. So then I'm going to have a dark label. And I'm going to have a light label, which starts with a capital. Okay, we need some text. And then we're going to do the same thing with the button. So I'm just going to copy this grid layout. I want to make sure I indent this correctly though. Right, so the grid layout needs to be at the same level as the labels, one column, but instead of the button dark, I'm going to use the mix one, and I call that, I think, just button dark mix. Yep, button dark mix. Right, so all that's left to do then is to call my screen, as in to set my screen as the root. So what does that do? Let's compare it to the my screen structure. So my screen's here. First thing, he has a grid layout with 2 rows. This is the first row. This is the second row. Within there, we have a dark box layout. That's why this whole thing is dark background. We then have a dark label, a light label, and then another grid layout here, which holds the button. And you can see the button is smaller because I'm using 200 as a padding. Now, you can see the color of this button is the same as the color of the dark label because this is the button that uses the pure colors. So click me is the light color and the background color is dark. So you click it, the background color turns light and the text color turns dark. So it's basically switches from this layout to this layout. Now, if we then move further down in my screen layout, you will then see that we are in the anchor layout. The anchor layout is dark, so that's why you're not seeing a difference between the grid layout here and the anchor layout there, because it's showing the same background color. Now, because I'm using padding, the light box layout, which is the gray box basically, you can see this frame here. Now, if I hadn't put any padding there, the box layout would have gone all the way to the edge. But I wanted to show you that little frame around it. And then again, you have your dark label as before, your light label, that is exactly the same, but we have a different button now. So now we have this color here is applied to the default color of the normal state of a button, which gives you a very dark color, and we set the text to be light. So if I press it, I get a different kind of blue, which is my filter applied to the default color of the pressed state of a button. So whichever takes your fancy. I quite like the fact that here your buttons have a different color. Of course, you could also set up a different color for your buttons as an instance variable here. Instead of having a widget dark, you could have a button dark. And the final thing to show you is I actually promised up here to show you a rounded corner. Where did I say that? Light labels with dark text and rounded corners. So if you want a rounded corner, as we have seen in previous videos, you need this to be a rounded rectangle, and you need another variable or property called radius, and you can set that to whichever value you want. So let's pick 20. So now you can see that our light labels are rounded. So there you go. I hope you found that helpful or interesting. And if you did, please leave a comment to tell me about it, like the video, or even consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much. See ya. Bye.